Friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm back after a long time. And in this presentation, I'm not focusing on any substantive issue. I'm talking about a very general concept, and that is of causality, which is employed by all social scientists. Somehow, after reading on causality philosophically and after studying causal research in empirical sciences, I got slightly disillusioned. I want to share my disillusionment with you. And if you are also as disillusioned with concept of causality as I am, then the question arises, what is left for social sciences? In this small presentation, I'm trying to say that in place of looking for causality, which actually is a vacuous term and which does not exist, we should start working towards uh, procuring the rights of the vulnerable sections of the population. We may identify our targets. They may be slum dwellers, they may be rural people, they may be LGBTQ plus, they may be women, so a certain gender, or they may be poor people or minority or anything, some vulnerable caste. But we have a target group, and we social scientists need to be concerned about generating that kind of knowledge with which rights of these vulnerable groups can be defended or state policies can be influenced. So I'm sharing with you my slides. My slides are here. The title of the slide is Abandoning Causality in Favor of Action. Action means social action. Friends, first I looked for a proper definition of causality, and I asked myself whether in this sense causality actually exists in social sciences or not. I read several definitions in encyclopedias, in Oxford Dictionary and other places, and found this Britannica definition quite helpful for my presentation. To quote from Britannica, in metaphysics, the causal relation exists between causes and effects. So, two things are required. One cause, another effect, which in our terms means independent variable and dependent variable, which are events, facts, or states of affairs. To say a cause bears a causal relation to an effect implies the former explains the later. This is called the cause-effect relation. So explanation is an important part of causality. A theoretical explanatory framework, which is as much rooted in empirical sciences as in the belief of the community of scientists. You have to find an explanation which is consistent with literature, with the community of scientists, and in that sense, causality is as much empirical as political. A causal relation exists between substances, concrete objects, particular things or entities. These relations are called agent-patient relations, where one thing acts upon another. David Hume said that X causes Y, means X's are constantly associated with Y's. Y's follow X's, and there is a necessary connection between them. So whenever X occurs, Y must follow. It's not clear after how much time. It may be immediately or it may be after some gap of time which is indefinite. Hume believed causation is a phenomenon humans project onto the world, and the idea of necessary connection comes from contemplating constantly conjoined objects or events. Uh, Social sciences, in general, use two different methodologies. One is called quantitative, another is qualitative. The quantitative methodology aims at obtaining unbiased, value neutral, dispassionate, objective, real reality, which lies outside our mind, which is objective, which is exterior to all of us, and which is real, part of real world. And the ultimate or the acid test or the ultimate goal of this kind of theorizing is to arrive at mathematical formulae. You know, at one time, this formula was seen as a good example of quantitative research, quantitative methodology. Why? Not because an empirical correlation was found between distance and number of migrants traveled, but a kind of formula could be found according to which total number of migrants between two places is a constant of proportionality into population of one place multiplied by population of the another place, the destination divided by the distance. So the ultimate aim is to arrive at that kind of formula. Uh, Quantitative researchers work with numbers to capture the true meaning of a phenomenon. For them, true meaning of a phenomenon lies in numbers and formulae, and that means that use of mathematics is inevitable to that kind of inquiry. Qualitative researchers deal with people's experiences, communities' experiences, subjective experiences of participants or respondents or groups of people. And they are interpretive, and there are multiple understandings possible of the same phenomenon. So, opening or closure of a coal mine may have different meanings for different communities, different people, for coal workers, or for peasants, farmers, for youth, for older persons, for environmentalists, for policymakers, for CEOs of the companies. There are different meaning systems or different understanding of the same phenomena. For some people, it is development. For other people, it is destruction of environment, employment, and health. It depends. So there are narratives. Now, qualitative methodology uses two main methods. These are methods. These are perspectives. These are like basic approaches. Now, within these approaches, there are different methods. Quantitative methodology uses two main methods. It does not mean that other methods are not possible, but two main methods: experimental methods and survey research methods. How is causality defined in experimental method? Let us see that. In experimental methods, we depend on the randomized controlled trial. Initially, it was medical science and agriculture, which were major users of this method. For the purpose of testing the effects of different agricultural practices, seeds, fertilizers, uh, and amount of water, frequency of water or irrigation, then water that has to be supplied to plants, or in medical sciences to test the efficacy of different drugs, particularly new forms of drugs on human patients. Gradually, it is spread to psychology, child psychology, psychology of disability, and so on, and economics. Nowadays, behavioral economics is an inevitable part of experimental or in general economics. Behavioral economics is also combined with econometrics and modeling. Now, what we do here is selecting an experimental group in which a treatment is produced, X treatment is produced, and a control group which lacks it. Subjects are divided among the two groups randomly so that for the large samples, they almost match with respect to characteristics or conditions other than X. But in very few cases, how large is a large sample is defined. Very few people think about determining sample size in complex ANOVAs or experimental designs. A small sample does not ensure that the two groups, one the control group, another the experimental group, will have matching characteristics with respect to all the factors other than X. More on this matter in the next slide. Behavior of participants in the two groups is measured and compared. If a significant difference is found in the measures between the two groups, effect Y is attributed to the cause X. The experimenters say that the treatment X is the cause of effect Y. Friends, in real life, an effect Y may be caused by several other factors. Therefore, all those other factors which might affect Y must be controlled. This is possible only in experimental studies, not in other types of study. In some cases, measurements are taken both prior to experimentation and after. If the treatment has an effect, it is shown in the change in measurements. Yet, there are issues with experimental theory. History, selection, mortality, regression towards mean, change of instruments, and sample size affect the results. Now, with time, both your independent and dependent variables may be changing on their own. There is selection of respondents. If you repeat a study, all the respondents which were available, or all the subjects which you had in the first measurement may not be available to you. Some of them may have died, some of them have migrated, some of them refused to be part of the experiment, and then regression towards mean, a general human tendency to move towards the middle of the road approach in repeated arguments or discussion, or repeat experiments or measurements. Change of instruments. If you change the instrument, then the readings may change. Sample size. Some more complex experiments like Solomon's four-group design. So there are advances in all methods, in all methodologies, and in experimental method also there are advancements. One example of advancement in experimental method is to use Solomon four-group design, which takes care of some of these threats to validity of finding, history, selection, mortality, etc. Yet there is no unquestioned cause and effect with both internal and external validity. Internal validity means that all those factors which might influence your dependent variable have been controlled, and either through randomization or through large samples or through experiment designed in that way. And external validity means that the findings of one research can be generalized to all kinds of settings or outside the setting in which your experiment is performed. Friends, most social scientists, particularly sociologists, depend on surveys, not experiments. Now, what is the meaning of the survey? The meaning of causality in surveys, causality is defined in terms of concomitant variation. If differences in X among the respondents are linked with differences in Y among them, then a causal connection between them is assumed. So, in the same survey, in the same structured interview schedule, if you find that respondents who are high on years of schooling are lower on children ever born, you say that there is a negative connection. It is quantified in terms of correlation coefficient, or more specifically, Carl Pearson's product moment correlation coefficient, or measures of association in case of qualitative variable, chi-square, other forms of coefficients of association, etc. However, correlations and associations may be deceptive and not always indicative of causal connection. Nobody will disagree with this statement. And attempts are being made to modify or to make changes in measures of correlations and causal connections. There may be reverse causality. If X affects Y, Y may also affect S. And correlations unsupported by theory. What do you do when your correlation is not supported by any theory? So in a complex situation, there are unidirectional and reciprocal relationships. Relationships between two or more sets of variables, when your variables are in the form of vectors and not in the form of scalar quantities. So there is a vector of poverty and there is a vector of personality and or culture, and you are trying to correlate them. There is a vector of development, like components of human development index, and there is a vector of indicators of health, longevity, life expectancy, healthy life expectancy, and so on. And you are trying to correlate them. What do you do then? the relationships between measurements and certain factors hidden behind measurement, personality, human development index. These are examples of factors which are hidden. They are not observed. Human development is not observed. Human development is observed in terms of a number of factors. And that is why every day you find new definitions of human development are coming, poverty sensitive, gender sensitive, this and that. Accordingly, social science, empirical social science is also moving towards partial and part correlation, path analysis, multiple regression, and the latest among all is structural equation modeling. Partial when effects of other factors are removed from both independent and dependent variables. Part when they are removed only from one variable. Path analysis when there are mutual causations and you are looking for direct and indirect effects. There are lots of endogenous and exogenous variables. Multiple regression when one variable y is affected by a number of independent variables x1, x2, x3, and so on. And there is structural equation modeling where both measures and factors are combined. And it's not very clear what explains what. So in factor analysis, we do not use arrows, we use only straight lines. These days, many social scientists are going for mixing of numeric and qualitative variables in surveys. This requires use of dummy variables for qualitative causes, axis, causes. So if cause is a caste or a religion, then we use dummies. There is so much of literature on dummies. Suppose we have four religious groups, then we make one of them reference category and we will use three dummies for three other religious groups. If the dependent variable itself is categorical, then we use logistic regression for qualitative effects. There is binary, there is multiple logistic regression, and there are odds ratios, adjusted odds ratios, and so on. And there are more advanced forms for analyzing qualitative variables both as causes and as effects. Surveys observe both causal and effect factors in the survey. This is a big problem. If you say that cause leads to effect after a gap of time, as the definition, theoretical or philosophical definition implies, then the problem with surveys is that surveys observe both causal and effect factors in the survey. Same time, same interview schedule, same structured interview schedule. Years of schooling and children ever born in the same questionnaire, in the same structured interview schedule, then what do we do? We cannot say that cause leads to effect in time. We only say that causes are associated. Where causes take higher values, then the effects take higher or lower values, like that. This needs application of common method variance. Mathematical social scientists have evolved because of disillusionment with the concept of causality as it is used at the moment. Constant experiments are being done or constant improvements are being made in methods of analysis, and a new method has been developed which is called common method variance. When both dependent and independent variables are measured from the same source, then we use common method variance. The definition of cause remains, however, vacuous. Causality in qualitative methodology also requires some consideration. Qualitative studies are based on narratives and experiences. Data are in the form of words, not numbers. They recognize importance of agency, people's agency, subject's agency, theoretical lenses in terms of which you look at social reality, context. Co-construction means the findings of the research are always co-constructed by the researcher and the participants. And by participants, I mean the participants in a given context. And by researcher, I mean researcher having a certain socio-economic background, beliefs, values, and experiences, and a biographical situation. Data are in the form of words, not numbers. They recognize importance of agency, theoretical lenses, context, co-construction, reflexivity, power structure. Yeah, that's why a new method in qualitative research has come up. This is called critical participatory method. Critical because it recognizes uh, that narratives are shaped by the power structure of society and sequence of events. Causality inferred from coding, open coding, axial coding, and selective coding. I'm using the term from grounded theory, but you need not use grounded theory approach. You can do coding manually. The purpose is that from people's narratives, you try to develop your own story and parts of that story, components of that story, I may call them sub stories. Your sub stories are to be supported by people's narratives. This can also be in order to bring some kind of objectivity into analysis. This can also be done by using computer. So many computer packages are now available to analyze qualitative data. Such studies lead to new questions, and no single study ever claims to establish the causal truth. Yeah, since they are contextual, since they use theoretical lenses, since they recognize agency of the participant, since they recognize co-construction, reflexivity means reflexivity of researcher on himself or herself, and the presence of power structure, they can never provide or they can never establish objective causal truth. Friends, thus, my view is, my considered view after going through literature on causal researches is that in social sciences, there are no perfect causes. Yet, all causes are tentative. In social sciences, there are no perfect causes, and all the causes or all the causal connections that we make are tentative. Causal connections, no matter how perfectly you have done your experiment, or no matter how perfectly you have designed your survey, our national sample survey is one of the uh, most perfectly designed surveys in the world. Yet, uh, all the conclusions are tainted. So what do we do? If we are disillusioned with the concept of universal causality or a formula like law or a mathematical law in the form of mathematical formulae, algebraic relationship, then what do we do? Nothing. Nothing can be done. I think our search for causality is a game that is already failed. So what do we do in that case? We can do many things. We can talk about them because they can help in policy making and advocacy of the rights of vulnerable groups. So we generate such knowledge, we generate such laws, such empirical connections, such politically sensitive narratives which help in the advocacy of the rights of the vulnerable groups. These vulnerable groups, as I said, may be gender, maybe slum groups, maybe rural areas, maybe minorities, maybe stigmatized populations, maybe like stigmatized LGBTQ plus, maybe minorities, different types of minorities may have different types of stereotypes, maybe certain castes which are seen as low. So we have to start working for them. Now, this means we stop looking for universal connections or meta narratives. We look for simple, uh, uh, simple simple narratives, uh, and we work for people's stories, experiences, and work for their causes. Uh, Postmodern theory has already demonstrated that the days of uh, meta narratives have gone. And we have to find out uh, narratives of people at the grassroots level. And we have to work to support the vulnerable groups or DU, those depressed, oppressed, or exploited groups. So this is what I wanted to say. But you may agree with me or you may not agree with me. Hmm. Most of my friends are still continuing using experimental economics, experimental psychology, or survey research in sociology to find out the truth. But what does history show? How many truths have they found? What does history show? How many truths social scientists, psychologists, economists, sociologists, political scientists, studies of personality, voting behavior, leadership, and all types of studies that social scientists do, how many truths they have established. They all say that truths are tentative. And if truths are tentative, let us abandon the search for truth of empirical or dispassionate or outside reality. Let us start working. Let us take up the position of social actors or actors acting on behalf of some. You cannot work for everyone, but you can identify your target groups and you start working for the protection of interests of those groups. This is what I wanted to say in this lecture.